Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, M&T Bank, Genova Burns. Additional support is provided by AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Collins Building Services, Connect One Bank, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investments, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Meridian Capital Group, New Banks, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, The Moynihan Group, and These Friends.
East side, west side, all around the town. That's all you see is new housing coming up. So who's building? Who's lending? What's happening? Is the market frothy? I don't know the answer. So today I've assembled this group of individuals at the Luxury Pavilion at the new corporate banking headquarters of Capital One Bank at 299 Park Avenue to provide their insight on the market. My guests, they include Nathan Berman, who's the principal at Metro Loft Development and Metro Loft Management. David Von Spreckelsen, who is the president of Tobro the City Living. On the other side, David Kramer, who's the president of the Hudson Companies. And last but not least, our host, our friend, who is the Greater New York Market Manager, Ben Stacks with Capital One Bank.
Thank you.
So you lend to these people, these two guys specifically. You might want to lend to him.
I've tried to lend to him.
You try to lend to him. So
I've tried to borrow from him.
You know, everybody is saying, you know, we're in the 7th inning, we're in the 5th inning, we're in the 12th inning, and our good friend Jeff Levine says we're out of innings. Sophie Ordeni just was quoted saying, if the real estate market was the stock market, the business, we would be in a depression. So how do you look at the market, especially since all of the people over here are developing different aspects throughout the city?
Yeah, we're not looking at innings, frankly. We're looking at sponsorship, and everybody here on this panel is our customer, or hopefully our customer, and we lend through cycles. We're not predicting innings. We're not, trying to time the market. We're lending to quality sponsors who build quality projects. You
know, before the show, I had the opportunity to speak to Nathan, and we were talking about Lower Manhattan, and saying that there are opportunities, and when he started really in Lower Manhattan in the end of the 90s, many of the major families really didn't look at the opportunities over there because you were able to buy the land or the building, the site, for $20 a foot. And right now, Nathan is doing, 180 Water Street, 20 Broad, 443 Greenwich. So how do you look at the market, and how do you look at it as rentals or as condos?
Well, our primary focus has always been rentals, market rate rentals. When I got to downtown in Manhattan, in the financial district in 1997, I couldn't believe that I could buy buildings below the cost of land they were sitting on. And to this day, it is actually still true. What has happened with land prices lately, these past 2 years, we're still acquiring buildings for less than that.
So you're doing a little different than David and David. You're acquiring existing, in many cases, office buildings or warehouses on Greenwich Street, and then converting them into rentals or luxury condominiums. You're a very active player. You've been active, what, about 15 or 20 developments since you've been at Toll Brothers?
That's about right, yeah.
So why haven't you ever thought of perhaps doing what Nathan has done with regard to taking these valuable assets, you know, which are great buildings, great structures, that have opportunities over there, and convert them?
The building that we're developing right now on 17th Street between 5th and 6th, it was an existing building, an old loft building, and we bought that with the intention of converting it. And then we started getting into it and looking at it, and we weren't really going to save any money doing it. We were going to leave some floor area on the table probably. And in the end, I just felt the facade wasn't very appealing. So we decided to take it down and do new construction. But we have looked at existing buildings. One of the things that we don't like to get involved with is tenants, because they can obviously be a problem, and oftentimes that's something that's going to come with existing buildings.
David?
You know, I would say that real estate is a big tent, and within it, it can be a niche business. We do ground-up residential. We tend to be in transitional neighborhoods. And within real estate, there are people who do ground-up, there are people who do value-add, commercial, retail, manufacturing, and so...
So how do you determine, and you know, I'd like Ben to have his also thought on this, how do you determine what's a transitional neighborhood?
We can afford it. So... you know,
opportunity cost, right?
I mean, one of the reasons Hudson has taken the journey it's taken is that our sort of company DNA is that if the land costs are high and hard costs are high and the break-even number is high, that makes us much less comfortable than having a better deal on land and having much lower break-even. Now that means that, you know, we may be out laboring in Prospect Lefferts Gardens as opposed to West Chelsea, and other people would say, like, I'm not going to be a schmuck like Kramer and go to Prospect Lefferts Gardens. I'm going to do prime high-line developments, and my basis is going to be $2,200 a square foot, which is fine because we're going to sell for $3,500 a square foot. So everybody has their business model. Our business model is as I just described it.
In the same manner as I was saying about innings, if you have enough singles, they equal home runs. And they add enough numbers so it doesn't matter.
No, you could have home runs in different neighborhoods. The way I would describe it is that New York City is not one game with one inning. There are different neighborhoods in different innings. You could say that the High Line is in the 8th inning in that, you know, land prices and condo prices seem fairly exorbitant. Not that there aren't plenty of buyers that are being successful.
I still remember when a company called the Hudson Companies went to 23rd Street before anybody was there.
So that's sort of, you know, we sort of say, our tagline should be, man, if we had stuck around and bought everything else, boy, would we have done well. Because
which is what Nathan was saying when he went to Lower Manhattan.
Yeah, we bought West Chelsea before it was West Chelsea. And every other building, you know, around us is, you know, star architecture. So, you know, we're in a lot of neighborhoods that are in the 2nd inning. And, you know, we're in a few buildings, you know, we're also in Williamsburg and Brooklyn Heights, but, you know, it's all about the economics, the basis, you know, what inning you think you're in, and there's not one storyline.
You know, one of the big subjects that everybody is bringing out, and I brought it up a little bit with Nathan before, is, you know, what is the price of these, as I think Bruce Eichner said to me, the Uber condominiums, you know, the pricing of $6,000, $7,000, I mean, you know, they're for a certain degree. And right over here, you know, right at Capital One's facility, you know, we're near RFR's property on 53rd and Lex. We have Ceruzzi's property on 50th, just a block away, that he's building on the former parking lot. You have Global Holdings on 60th and Park Ave. All of these, you know, you have all these, and you have 432 Park Avenue, just to speak about that. Where do you see prices, you know, the normal customer, who can afford this, and who's buying? Nathan, who's buying in your property, which is less expensive, but it's still relatively high?
443 Greenwich is a little different. It's really geared not towards a wider market. Units are Least expensive unit is $8 million. So it's a different niche. These are the smallest apartment is 3,000 feet or 2,800 square feet. It's a market that probably isn't subject to interest rate fluctuation or other.
People aren't worrying about what kind of mortgage that they're going to have.
Yeah, they are not on 57. We are not on 57th Street. These are apartments that people are buying to live in. Whether they will live in them for two weeks of the year or not is a different question. So it's a little bit different from other most other projects.
So what you're saying, as opposed to perhaps David von Spreckelson's condos, a number of those people will not utilize them full time.
May not utilize them full time, and this is not a value play. This is a for the buyer. It's the location, it's the privacy, it is the exclusivity, it's the amenities that the building offers. So it's not your typical. This is not a Chinese buyer that wants to make an investment. This is literally we have a lot of entertainment people. We have a lot of very well-to-do individuals that want privacy, do not want to advertise their home.
Right, and it's only like 52 units?
It's 52 units, and it's a fairly substantial building.
So how do you look as a bank? I know it's a relationship. Everything is the relationship. But, you know, there are buildings today that are having difficulties on some of the ultra-uber properties. They're taking a little longer to rent out, to sell out. You know, and as somebody said to me, he was a developer, he said, I'm different. I just like to know I can pay off the construction loan so I don't have the bank or the entity behind me financing. Too many of the ultra expensive properties, it's not only a bank. In many cases, it's a bank, it's a preferred equity, it's mezzanine lending. How do you look at all this?
I think it's, we touched on it, I think it's an ongoing affordability issue, first of all, and we are concerned about the volume of condos that are coming on the market because there's certainly a lot going on around the city, and that's impacting our view on the market. I think that we're going to have a bulge coming through the market here of supply, and that's a little worrisome because heretofore things have really taken up very well. The sales have been going very well, but we're starting to see some slowdowns around the city, and we are concerned about that. In terms of, leverage in the properties, you just mentioned preferred equity and mezzanine, we tend to, in condo deals especially, we tend to stay away from higher leverage deals where we like the sponsors to have, a lot of cash in the property, and we like our break-evens to be at a reasonable number, obviously. So. But this is a constant conversation we're having. We are concerned about the condo market.
One of the biggest items that's coming up all the time in the newspapers, and I don't believe any of you have utilized it, and I'm not sure if you've accepted on financing, is the EB-5s. And people are saying, the EB-5 was created specifically for job development in areas of economic difficulties. And a lot of properties are taking EB-5. Has Toll Brothers looked at it?
We've looked at it, but we haven't pursued it anywhere yet.
Nathan, have you?
No, we've never looked at it.
Yeah, no, we're looking at it. And one of the interesting things is that the jobs that it creates, those construction workers, they're not living in Midtown Manhattan. So it's still a job creation for people who, who want to be employed. So, I don't buy into that argument. And, I know Congress extended it till December, so we'll see what happens from December.
So what about the other topic, which is very interesting? Everybody has gone to Tel Aviv, and everybody wants to do bond financing. They think it's an area of expertise. Have you reviewed the opportunities?
I've been approached actually several times. I know people that have done it very, very successfully. Frankly, my issue isn't capital. It's finding product. So my first focus is on product and money. I deal with substantial investors that are really not looking for additional cash.
You?
We've looked at it. It's cheap equity. You have
right.
cash flowing projects. You have to have a lot of projects. It's got to be a bulk big numbers.
Right, because you're getting the money, and if you don't use it, you lose. You're paying interest on it.
You're basically monetizing your equity in cash flowing projects. It doesn't work for us because we have a lot of different ownership structures with a lot of different partners. It works where you have the same LLC, the same entity owning, the same principals owning multiple properties. So that's why it's getting popular with it.
When we were talking earlier, and we were talking about, my question was, how do you look at the boroughs? We were saying the boroughs are very large in different areas, like Brooklyn. There are different areas in Brooklyn, there are different areas in Queens. And the lead article this month in The Real Deal, and I did a show a couple of months ago, was the Bronx. You're developing up in the Bronx an affordable unit project. Have you looked at the Bronx?
We have yet to look at the Bronx. Maybe soon, I don't know. We're looking at Staten Island. We've done a project in Queens. We've done a number in Brooklyn. Quite a few in Manhattan, but the Bronx we haven't gotten to yet.
Now, you were one of the early people to do projects in Long Island City.
Yeah, I was. So when I was leaving Silver Cup, they were doing the rezoning was happening in Queens in the Hunters Point Special District. And so I had my eye on some stuff there. And when I got to Toll, we jumped on what I think was the best site that was available at the time. And it was on 5th Street and 48th Drive, and we did a project, 5th Street Lofts, which went very well. We're very happy with it. Thinking about going back, but the land pricing there now is just, it's so hard to rationalize after what we paid. And I think that in certain neighborhoods there's obviously a cap on what you're going to be able to sell the condos for. And now without 421A being available for condos, and we were talking earlier about the monthly nut, it gets tough to do a project for us in a location like that, knowing that there's that cap and where construction costs are today and where land prices are today. It's dicey, and that's why we've focused, I would say, in the last 5 years primarily on Manhattan, where there's less of a cap and there can be a bigger bang for the buck.
What's other people's views of Staten Island, Nathan? Or you have great views from your building at 180 Water, and
we out of some of the buildings we do see Staten Island, but I haven't really looked at it seriously.
So we have a separate account with the New York City pension system, and to invest, particularly in neighborhoods that were impacted by Hurricane Sandy, which includes Staten Island. So we've spent a lot of time looking in Staten Island, the South, Brooklyn, waterfront, different areas that were impacted by Sandy, and we sort of ask ourselves the same question, which is that where are young renters going to go for the next deal where they'd want to live, which has good quality of life, where it's safe, where the retail is okay and decent, and which has decent commutes and good transit-based locations, because Brooklyn's gotten very expensive. And so if you were a tenant 20 years ago, you went to Williamsburg, and if you were a tenant 10 years ago, you went to Fort Greene, Prospect Heights, and now we just
finished. You have to remember he was the pioneer in Williamsburg.
No, he wasn't.
One of them.
One of the pioneers.
The renters were the pioneers in Williamsburg, so that when a condo project came along, it was safer to do because it had established itself. No disrespect to Northside Piers. And so when we just finished a project in Kensington. So Kensington is a neighborhood I probably never even heard of 10 years ago. And we just finished a building in Kensington, a rental building, and we thought we'd get rents in the 30s, high 30s, and we rented it out about $50 a foot. So if Kensington, which probably half of your viewership hasn't heard of, is getting $50 a foot, what does that mean for the next tenants and the people coming out of school and where you can get a decent rent? And so it may not be within 2 blocks of Prospect Park. So then the question is, where is next? Is it going to be Staten Island, walking distance of the ferry? Is it going to be South Bronx with good transit access? Is it going to be parts of Queens? Is it going to be off the Q? We've done a lot of projects off the Q, deeper and deeper into Brooklyn. But you have to figure out what makes sense.
What about the Gowanus?
If Gowanus was rezoned tomorrow, it would be like it would grow like a weed, like the Queens West waterfront. David's probably kicking himself that Lightstone is now doing the Gowanus residential project. We did 3rd and Bond as a condo, which was unfortunate, timing-wise. I'd love to be selling that project today or renting that project today. There's a huge interest in that part of Brooklyn. Subway access is decent. It's basically where Brownstone, Brooklyn is. The zoning is not ripe for residential. There's still some, sandy elevation issues. But it is evolving and growing organically in the M zone.
What about the Rockaways?
The Rockaways is challenging. We did some affordable housing in the Rockaways. It's a long commute. We were talking earlier that as there are more job centers that are not just Manhattan-centric, if you can go to downtown Brooklyn or to Industry City, different locations where the commute is not as bad. So Rockaways has...
You have to remember, not everybody could take a car or a zip car or a bicycle to certain of these locations.
Yeah.
It's nice to talk about bicycles, but when it's very cold, it's a difficult trip on a bicycle to go to various parts of Brooklyn.
Did we just segue to you being a bicycle hater? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, no, not segue. Let's get a little bit on Lower Manhattan, because I think Nathan has really dedicated quite a bit of his life in the development. How has the rents gone up over the last couple of years, and the nature of who the tenants are?
Well, we've seen quite a transformation, obviously, from the late 90s to the present. We sort of say that that downtown went from an orphan to a favorite child in the last 10, 15 years. Rents have gone up from, I remember in the late 90s, from mid-40s, low 40s, to today mid-60s and 70s. So it's a very, very healthy growth. It's an area that's the highest density in the city, and we're still seeing. I'm still pinching myself because we're still seeing opportunity in our business. I sort of, my hat is off to the gentlemen here that do all this ground up assembling projects. We go after large 500,000-foot projects that are out of the ground, that take us typically 13 or 14 months to get our first residential rent out of. So it's an exciting time.
So here's the question: you're doing rental and condo, correct?
Primarily rental. We have one condo project.
One condo. You're doing mostly condos.
In New York City, all condo.
Why don't you go rentals in New York City?
We're a division of a national home builder, and so it's always been for sale, home ownership, buy, build, sell, buy, build, sell, buy, build, sell. We don't generally hold on to things. In recent years, we've gotten more active with a new division called Toll Brothers Apartment Living, and started doing some garden-style apartments in different places in the country. And now we're looking at urban areas, and we do have a couple of projects in Washington, D.C., and one in Jersey City. And we have looked at Manhattan, and all of New York City, but right now it's just a really difficult time to do a rental project because of the price of land. So the timing isn't great, but I think, when we get through the next cycle, there may be a time when we start to do some rental, and Gowanus would be a perfect location to do that.
Shoulda, coulda.
The timing was off.
It's timing.
That's all it is.
And as a question, because they've been talking about the Gowanus, has Capital One Bank looked at any development deals?
We've looked at a few, sure. I mean, there was some concern about it being a Superfund site, and
which was what David had.
Which was why we pulled out. We felt home ownership would be difficult to do there. If we were in the midst of marketing for sale product when guys are walking around in white suits doing remediation, it was going to be really hard. But I think that because there are so few great neighborhoods that are so close to Manhattan for people who work in Manhattan, and you're in the middle of brownstone Brooklyn, Gowanus is a perfect location for rental, and they'll do very, very well there. Home ownership is a different story, and like David said, the rest of the properties there are not yet zoned. We got ours rezoned, but nothing else is. So the other prospect of having home ownership there being a little island amongst everything else that's still industrial, how well is that going to sell?
One of the areas which has great amount of land is Coney Island. You had mentioned you were in Brighton Beach. Brighton Beach, the subway, you have more access, and you can get into the city in 50 minutes. Coney Island, you get off the subway, and then you have to take another commute. So you're adding another 15 to 20 minutes. Any thoughts about Coney Island? Because, you know, it's the water. It has, you know, opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, you know, probably rental, right? So, and we're not, I mean, we'll look at it from that perspective, but I don't think for condo. I think, you know, when you do condo, you have one chance to sell, and everything has to be exactly right. And if it's perceived as pioneering, you're not going to do particularly well.
You know, you bring up the condo, and I'll ask Nathan on a rental. I remember during the recession, you couldn't sell a condo unless you built that model apartment or you had something to sell. In today's world, you sell condos out of floor plans and model apartments within offices?
Yeah, you do a sales office where you have vignettes, bathroom, kitchen, so people can see what the finishes are, but they buy off of plans. And it's been the case for ever since we've been here.
It's cyclical. So when the market's hot, you buy off plans. When you can be choosy, you wait and see what you're getting. You can kick the tires a little better.
So with regard, and I think this is good for my viewers, when you're renting a new building, what type of concession will you give to the tenant to move in there?
When we rented just a finished product 2 years ago, 116 John Street, and this is with Sandy in the middle, I believe there may have been a 1 month free on rents, but generally the demand for rentals in downtown is so great. Plus, downtown is still, I would say, probably 20% cheaper than any other area in New York City.
I mean, there must be, what, 6,000 units coming on board in downtown Brooklyn, David? Rental units. I'm not talking about condos. I think Lower Manhattan has much more amenities, much more opportunities, and, you know, downtown Brooklyn is growing, but it doesn't have all of the retail, it doesn't have the opportunity, it doesn't have the innocuous, it doesn't have the Whole Foods. And I mean, we're talking about a large Whole Foods over there on Murray Street, as opposed to certain others.
It wasn't long ago that downtown didn't have a lot of retail.
No, they had nothing.
Right.
By the way,
and Nathan was building before that all happened.
Right, you had to depend on the smaller Gristidis over there.
Well, you know, bankers would ask in late 90s, you know, when looking at projects, you know, where are the supermarkets? Who will rent here? And of course, all those questions have been answered. But incidentally, you mentioned Brooklyn and even Long Island City. It's now the rental housing now, the brand new housing, is at the price of our conversions in downtown.
Correct, and not at, I believe, the higher.
There may be,
places over there.
May be, indeed.
Where do you see land today? I mean, are we still at this unbelievable pinnacle that prices of land are going up, 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 and up?
I don't know if it's plateaued, but it's definitely tipped away from rental to condo. It's really hard to do a rental today. And, you know, the break-even rental number, you know, you have to be incredibly bullish about your rental market. Or maybe it's a deal with, you know, a long-term owner. But, you know, it's just like it was, you know, 7 or 8 years ago. The land's getting too expensive to do rentals. So you're going to see the pro rata percentage of rental versus condo basically flip over the next 5 years.
What about with regard to the question of tax abatements?
So we're looking at everything now where for condo that there would be no abatement. That's just probably not something that's going to be a possibility. But what we've found, since we've done a couple of projects where people have to pay full taxes, they've been paying the taxes, and we haven't really suffered as much as we thought we would on purchase prices.
As I started the show, East Side, West Side, all around the town, there's cranes, there's developments, there are renovations, and I think the city is still in a positive way. I don't think we're in the ninth inning with two strikes out. I think maybe there's a pinch hitter who's going to even up the score. And I'd like to thank Nathan Berman, David von Spreckelsen, David Kramer, and our host, Ben Stacks of Capital One Bank for being here. See you next week.